It's a little bit of a hot take, so you gotta bear with me. But contrary to what you might hear from others, I happen to think that this Steelers Texans matchup is actually the most compelling of the entire wildcard week. And by that, I mean the stakes just legitimately couldn't be higher. Not as in now that Harbaugh's out in Baltimore, Mike Tomlin's really on the hot seat. No, I mean, will Aaron Rodgers literally disintegrate from Danielle Hunter or Will Anderson? Possibly both. And inversely, will Nick Herbig or Alex Highsmith on Ursery, a really bad tackle, also some really good pass rushers there, will they cause CJ Stroud to disintegrate? It's up in the air. TJ Watt, too. Less lung to hold him back, weighing him down perhaps. So he's going to be even fleeter of foot against one of the slowest players in the entire league in Trent Brown. That's interesting. You gotta be on alert for any moment in this game where you just might see the quarterback vanish into thin air because they just get totally devoured by the edge play. And, the crazy thing is, we're going to start with the Texans offense. The Texans got to be wary of Cam Hayward in the interior as well. It's not just going to be Stroud getting, attacked from the edges. It's going to be Hayward beating the guards, beating Andrews as a center who's pretty weak. Howard hasn't been too good at guard this year either, unfortunately. Ingram's been pretty good, but that's about it. Unfortunate for the Texans, their offensive line is not great. It's definitely overstated how bad it is because it's definitely a workable line. It's just not good. But matchup wise, Trent Brown is so matchup dependent that it's honestly ridiculous. Where if he gets help on the speed rushers, he can be fine. If he's going against a strong edge rusher, he's going to be great. But if he's going to have to one on one anybody with any amount of speed, it's going to be very, very iffy. So that is something to be on alert for. Maybe we do get to see TJ Watt look good again. It's been some time since we've seen that. So the big thing, though, is definitely going to be for this Texans offense. Hot take here. Will Nico Collins, the best receiver, potentially the best offensive player by a wide margin even? I need to clarify that because it's not potentially. He just is the best offensive player for the Texans. I wouldn't say he's the best total player, though, so needed to put in a little bit of a caveat there. But will Collins dominate his matchup? And I say dominate instead of win because I do think there's no reason to project him not winning. PFF would suggest that James Pierre for the Steelers is like the best corner in the entire league. They have him ranked second now, but throughout the year he's been right in striking distance at a minimum for first. Unlimited snaps, albeit, but either way, that's one that I just don't really see, to be completely honest. I think he's fine, but never crosses my mind for elite corner. So he could match up, though, with Collins pretty well. So could Porter, theoretically, even though Porter is really up and down. He had a good season this year, the best of his career. So they have the matchup potential to get Collins, off his game some and not just totally torch them. But it's definitely within the realm of possibility that Collins just destroys this secondary that's not good, to be completely honest. And, the Steelers, though they have the athletic profiles, Pierre's pretty big, Joey Porter Jr. is big and pretty fast. They have the profiles to cover him, but, that's pretty much it. It's not necessarily a talent thing for them. So I think Collins can definitely just get you 100 plus yards this game, potentially. The run game for the Steelers, pretty weak. Definitely can be moved around. Very squishy, even with Hayward being a great defensive tackle and Watt being a premier edge setter. So, they can definitely have some success through that with the Texans, though they never have success on the ground seemingly, and they still do it every single play almost. So that'll be interesting to see, the stoppable force and the movable object, as I like to say. Also, I think Schultz is in for a big game here. Peyton Wilson has shown some coverage chops in the past, but has had a not good year this season. Patrick Queen, you know, like the ninth time out of, 10. He hasn't been in the league that long, but you get the idea that he's not good. So, linebacker, really, really iffy for the Steelers, as it's been for years now. Safety, too, if they match up on him, Duggar's not going to do it. Ramsey, maybe. So, Schultz is going to have a lot of favorable matchups here. If they get Eccles on him, they can do stuff, but then who's guarding Kirk? It's kind of a danged if you do, danged if you don't situation, so they're going to have to put a lot of attention into Collins to make sure he doesn't go off, but then at that point, Kirk and Schultz are likely to really pose issues. Higgins isn't a bad option as well, so there's a lot of things to like for the perimeter players for the Texans, but the line is really going to be interesting. Stroud depends on the day with him. It is either not going to bother him pressure or it's just going to completely devastate him, so that's going to be hard to project. But if he does play in rhythm and gets the ball out quick enough without also playing scared, which I think is the likely thing. I'm not 100% sure on it because, like I said, he is inconsistent with that, but I think the likely thing is he does execute at a solid level and his guys will be open more than likely. So that should minimize the pressure a fair bit. I think that's a pretty winning formula for the Texans on offense, which is not something you get to say every day. Moving to the Steelers offense, this is where things become potentially diabolical. They have one legitimate receiver in DK Metcalf, and they have some tight end play. Pat Freiermuth, he's a good number one tight end, I guess. A really good number two, a good-ish number one, though, kind of right in that average range. Jonnu Smith is all right. They're, luckily for them, they're not matched up against one of the best defenses of, the past several years, or actually they are, and that is really where things become, as I said, diabolical, because the line is good for the Steelers, believe it or not. They had the potential, in my eyes, to be pretty decent this year, as in, roughly average, I thought, but they're actually a strength of the team, for sure, not just because Rodgers gets the ball out as soon as he touches it, but they've been good in pass protection. PFF has had them right around top 10, I believe even top 5 they closed out at for the year, so they're good. And that should help a lot with the pass rush, in addition to, the most important thing being Rodgers just getting the ball thrown somewhere as soon as he gets it. He does kind of do a disservice most of the time because he is so scared to get hit because he has no play extension to him that he just gets rid of the ball and he doesn't necessarily let the play out, which is tough because his receivers generally don't get separation quickly, so that kind of puts more strain there. But in this case, you're willing to take it even with having a good line, unless you have the all-time Eagles Cowboys line type of deal. Not Cowboys of this year, I mean in past iterations, all of their best. You got to be really, really scared of this Texans pass rush. Obviously, Anderson and Hunter, as I mentioned. Rankins is a good interior player. Autry's a pretty nice tweener. Not the best, but all right. Togiai is a good option at defensive tackle as well. So, it's just a really continual wave of them. They have the absolute superstar stuff, and they have, guys that can rotate in at a high level too. So it's going to be very, very, daunting for Rodgers here. It's going to have to be under 2.5 seconds or max 2.5 seconds, and that's basically it. So it's going to be him at his absolute quickest. And at that point, Stingley on Metcalf, even if it's Lassiter on Metcalf, Lassiter's a great corner as well. That's, you know, at best, I would say that's 50-50. I'm taking both Stingley and Lassiter over Metcalf in one on ones, but the Texans don't have to do one on one either. They can do some help off of him because, you know, who else is going to beat them? Pat Fryermuth? No. Like, that's the long and the short of it. If they get into short yardage situations, Alshire is more than capable of erasing Fryermuth. That, becomes less of a thing. Bryant is capable of doing that. Bullock as well. Petrie, a ton of guys can. So, what the Steelers are banking on here offensively is, honestly, I hate to say this, but I think they're banking on a couple miscues where, maybe it's a self-inflicted wound by the Texans where there's a poor, coverage break in assignment that leads to something the Steelers get that isn't necessarily deserved. Gainwell to be really, really dynamic and, attack Toa Toa, not a good linebacker. That is a weakness of the Texans. He's not, god awful, but he's not good. Definitely the weakest component of this defense, I would say. So, if you can stress out Alshire and Toa Toa, that becomes doable to have a competent offense, but the Texans have a lot of ways to ensure that you don't really get to them with everybody else just winning their matchups that, you kind of shield them at a certain point. And especially, again, in this case where, you scared Petrie's going to lose to Thielen. If so, you need help. So there's, something to just the general idea of, an NFL offense can have something against, even the best of defenses. Maybe Valdez Scantling gets, a kind of poor rotation of the coverage and he gets something deep, not needing to be targeted 3 times in the red zone where he's not good. Something like that, that could potentially be the case, but I think you're really grasping at straws here to feel any sort of confidence in the Steelers offense against this Texans defense. I think they're stifling enough to where even if you have the best offense, you got to be very leery. The Bills dominated twice in a row now, this year and last year or a couple years ago against this Texans defense. So, I don't think the Steelers are better than the Bills offensively, I'll tell you that much. So, if they can do that to the Bills, they can definitely do that or more to the Steelers. I know it's in Acrisure. I almost said Heinz Field, but Acrisure has been called by the rare ball knowers recently. So, that helps a little bit. It does make it to where the pass rush for the Texans gets calmed down a little bit more and gets amplified a bit more in the case of the Steelers. So, maybe there's that angle for both lines on the defensive side being better than the offensive counterparts. Maybe that, becomes more of a thing for the Steelers and the gap gets closed and then, the Texans kind of defeat themselves. But if you haven't noticed, that's kind of the theme here, is I'm not really saying that it's a Steelers victory so much as it is a Texans loss if that transpires. So with that said, I'm thereby obviously taking the Texans in this game, feeling rather good about it. I don't think the Steelers break the 8th longest drought of playoff wins in the NFL. I think that keeps going. I think there becomes more and more, controversy, what have you, around Tomlin's job. I think, that's all up in the air. So I think the Texans win here. I think they win pretty solidly. Maybe the the Steelers have some, success with Gainwell having a really good game and Warren gets involved if he's good to go, maybe that, you know, keeps it close and the Texans also run a lot, say, so, there's just not a lot of drives and thereby not a lot of separation that could transpire, maybe. But I'm definitely taking the Texans here. So thank you for watching the video. Be sure to like the video if you liked it. Subscribe, as I'll be doing more NFL and then college football content and then the NBA soon enough. So be sure to subscribe for all that. Be sure to comment what your thoughts are on this. And also be sure to treat yourself like a friend.